silence anyone who resists.
Try that, and SWAT's at your door.
You don't get a warning anymore, Daniel, Brenda Holloway said, her heel planted across my threshold like she already owned the house. Non-compliance escalates tonight. The board chair smiled while saying it, that tight little grin she used when she thought people would fold. The enforcer in crimson held her clipboard against her blazer and glanced past my shoulder like she was inspecting inventory instead of a family home. That lock you're threatening to find me over? I said quietly. I designed the firmware that runs it. Her smile twitched, just a flicker. The clipboard queen didn't like surprises, especially from the neighbor she'd already labeled difficult. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back. The tyrant in heels straightened. This isn't about gadgets. It's about HOA authority. I finally stepped onto the porch, letting the security light wash over her face. I'd spent 15 years installing residential security systems across 3 states. Police departments used my sensor arrays. Gated communities paid premiums for my designs. Quiet work, mostly invisible. That was the point. Protection worked best when nobody noticed it. Authority stops at my property line, I told her, calm as still water. Brenda Holloway laughed under her breath. She always did that when she thought she'd already won. Behind her, the quiet cul-de-sac slept under warm Arizona streetlights, identical roofs, trimmed hedges, rules laminated into existence. Our neighborhood looked peaceful from the outside. That illusion sold homes. Then her gaze drifted to the old mesquite tree in my yard. That tree's roots are lifting sidewalk concrete, the board chair said. Removal notice goes out tomorrow. Something in my chest tightened. That tree wasn't landscaping. My daughter and I planted it the spring after my wife passed. Lily's hands were so small she used a plastic cup instead of a shovel. We mixed the soil together. She said the tree would grow tall enough for Mom to see from heaven. I told her roots meant staying strong even when storms came. Now this woman wanted it gone because it didn't fit her visual grid. Where are you watching from? I asked lightly, eyes still on Brenda. Because around here, people like knowing who stands between their homes and trouble. She frowned, unsure why I sounded almost conversational. A memory flashed. Lily asleep on the couch hugging her mother's old cardigan, the house too quiet. The promise I made beside a hospital bed that I'd keep our girl safe no matter what. Safety wasn't theoretical to me. It was a vow. The enforcer in crimson tapped her clipboard. Tree removal, unauthorized lock hardware, and failure to submit design approvals. 3 violations. Unauthorized. The word burned. Every camera, every sensor, every alarm in this house existed because one night, years ago, I'd arrived home 2 minutes too late to say goodbye. Control was an illusion, but preparation wasn't. You really walked onto my porch at night to threaten my home? I asked. This is a scheduled compliance visit, Brenda Holloway replied. Perfectly legal. A warm desert breeze moved through the leaves above us. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A silent system pinged from the perimeter sensors. Routine status check, green across the board. I looked at her, at the perfect posture, the polished confidence, the belief that bylaws made her untouchable. Funny thing about systems, I said. They record everything. Her eyes narrowed. Down the hallway behind me, a floorboard creaked softly. Lily must have turned in her sleep. The sound grounded me, reminded me what actually mattered. Brenda pivoted to leave, satisfied she'd delivered her warning. Expect formal notices. She walked down my steps like a queen leaving conquered land. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my home didn't just sit in this neighborhood. It watched it. And that night, something on my network had already started flagging unusual activity near our property line. I didn't realize yet that this quiet standoff was the first domino, or that before long, flashing red and blue lights would paint these calm streets, and men in tactical gear would move faster than any HOA letter ever could. I just stood there under the mesquite tree, listening to the faint hum of my own security system, feeling the air shift like a storm building beyond the horizon. Morning came too fast. I barely slept after Brenda Holloway left my porch with her polished threats. The board chair had a way of lingering in the mind, like a smoke alarm that wouldn't stop chirping. My security dashboard glowed on the kitchen tablet while coffee brewed. Yellow alerts dotted the perimeter log, small anomalies near the side gate and back fence. Nothing critical, but enough to make me replay the night. I pulled up timestamps and camera thumbnails. A shadow passed twice along the property line after midnight. Not random motion, steady, human, deliberate. Lily padded in wearing her school hoodie, hair messy, eyes still warm with sleep. She poured cereal and looked at the screen. Someone's walking by our fence again? Probably a neighbor cutting through, I said, though my shoulders stayed tight. Kids deserved calm mornings, not tension. Still, I switched the system to higher sensitivity. By noon, I drove to the community mail kiosk where people traded gossip like currency. Mrs. Alvarez waved me over. She lowered her voice. "That clipboard queen has been busy," she said. "Busy how?" I asked. "She's issuing fines everywhere. Trash cans, paint shades, even flag sizes. Feels like she's hunting." Mr. Hahn joined us, shaking his head. "The enforcer in crimson showed up at my door at dawn," he muttered. "Said my driveway cracks were a safety concern." Patterns mattered in my line of work. Predatory systems pushed small violations to justify bigger control. HOAs could do that too. I checked my phone and pulled public permit maps for our block. One detail stood out. The HOA boundary markers didn't match county filings. Not illegal yet, but sloppy. Sloppy created openings. A black sedan rolled past slow. Brenda Holloway sat inside, sunglasses on, scanning lawns like inventory. The tyrant in heels stopped near the kiosk and stepped out. Her smile snapped into place when she saw me. "Daniel," she said sweetly, "violation letters go out today." "I'll review them," I replied. She glanced at the neighbors listening nearby. "That mesquite removal is non-negotiable." Mrs. Alvarez stiffened beside me. "That tree shades 3 homes," I said. "Saves cooling costs." The board chair shrugged. "Aesthetics matter more." She left a bright envelope in my mailbox slot like a card from a debt collector. Then she walked away, heels ticking like a timer. I opened the envelope. 3 fines, 1 warning, and a notice about unauthorized security modifications. My jaw tightened. Across the lot, a younger man watered shrubs, watching us too closely. He looked away when our eyes met. Something about his posture, half guilt, half fear, stuck with me. A potential witness, maybe. Back home later, I mounted an extra camera toward the side yard, not to spy on neighbors, but to document approaches. The system synced quietly, feeding data to my secure server. Every ping told a story if you knew how to read it. At dusk, the first new alert chimed, side gate vibration, then a soft metallic click. I checked the live feed. A gloved hand tested the latch from outside. My pulse slowed instead of racing. Preparation beat panic. I saved the clip and tagged the time. Through the window, the mesquite branches swayed, shadows crawling across the yard like quiet warnings. Footsteps crunched faintly on gravel beyond the fence. Whoever lingered out there wasn't lost. They were checking. I turned off the kitchen light and let the house go still. Another soft rattle touched the lock. My screen captured it all. Somewhere in the dark, a car door closed quietly. I stayed by the counter, listening to the hum of electronics and the distant hush of sprinklers. This wasn't random anymore. Someone was mapping us, and tomorrow I would start mapping back because people who tested boundaries often revealed their plans without meaning to. I intended to be ready. The rattle at the side gate faded, but the feeling it left behind stayed under my skin like a splinter. I replayed the clip again at the kitchen table, zooming on the gloved hand. The movement wasn't clumsy or curious. It was careful, intentional. Someone checking how secure we were. Sunlight stretched across the floor when the doorbell rang. I opened it expecting a package. Instead, the younger man from the mail kiosk stood there, cap in his hands, shoulders slightly hunched like he wanted to take up less space. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "I'm Evan, from 2 houses down." His eyes flicked past me into the house, then back to the ground. Sweat darkened the collar of his shirt even though the morning was cool. "Yeah?" I asked. He shifted his weight. His fingers rubbed the brim of his cap over and over. "Nervous habit. I think you should know someone's been talking about your place." "Who?" My voice stayed even. His jaw tightened. He didn't answer right away. A car rolled by outside and he glanced at it like it might be listening. "The clipboard queen," he murmured finally. "Brenda Holloway." He said her name quietly, like it carried consequences. "What about her?" I asked. Evan swallowed. His knee bounced. "She's been asking who's home at night, which houses have kids, which cameras are real." A slow chill crept up my spine. Why would she ask that? He hesitated again. His shoulders curled inward. internal tug-of-war written all over his posture. He wanted to speak, but fear kept a leash on him. "I shouldn't get involved," he muttered. "You already are," I said gently. "You came here." Through the window, I saw a flash of red fabric across the street. The enforcer in crimson herself stepped out of her sedan, scanning houses, not looking at anything, assessing, like a landlord inspecting property she didn't own. Evan noticed too. His voice dropped. She told the board some homeowners were non-compliant risks. "Risks?" I repeated. He nodded, arms folding tight across his chest. Said enforcement sometimes needs physical verification. I don't even know what that means. It meant overreach. It meant someone testing limits. Across the street, Brenda Holloway's gaze drifted toward my house. Sunglasses hid her eyes, but her chin lifted slightly when she noticed my door open. The tyrant in heels gave a thin smile that never reached her cheeks. Evan stepped back from my doorway on instinct, like prey spotting a predator. His heel caught the edge of my doormat. He nearly stumbled, then steadied himself. "She asked me about your alarm system," he blurted. "Said she needed to know if it violated community signals." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Alarm frequencies weren't HOA territory. "Did you tell her anything?" I asked. His face flushed. Silence answered first, then a small nod. "Just that you work with tech. I didn't know it mattered." Honesty trembled in his voice. Regret, too. "It's fine," I said. "You didn't give her access codes." His eyes widened. "No, of course not." The board chair across the street lifted a clipboard and pretended to jot something down while watching us. The performance was obvious. She wanted us to feel seen. Evan leaned closer. "She's coming tonight. I heard her tell her husband they'd handle it quietly." The words hung between us. "Why tell me this?" I asked. His throat bobbed. "Because my sister lives with me, and if she can do this to you, she can do it to anyone." That was the first steady thing he'd said. A notification pinged on my tablet behind me. Side gate sensor, daytime trigger. I turned the screen slightly so he could see. A fresh log entry blinked. Someone had touched the latch again. Evan's shoulders sagged like a decision had finally landed. Fear still lived in his eyes, but now there was resolve beside it. "If anyone asks," he said quietly, "I was never here." Across the street, Brenda Holloway slid back into her car, satisfied, like a chess player confident in her next move. I watched her drive off, already planning 3 moves ahead, because people who probed fences rarely stopped at fences. And tonight, if they tried again, they wouldn't just meet a lock and an alarm. They'd meet a system that remembered everything. I barely slept after that thought settled in. Every creak of the house sounded like a footstep testing our patience. I sat at the dining table with the tablet glowing, reviewing sensor logs, mapping timestamps, building a quiet timeline of interest around our home. At noon, a white envelope appeared in our mailbox, stamped with the HOA seal. The clipboard queen never wasted time when she smelled leverage. I opened it right there by the curb. A violation notice accused us of unauthorized security modifications causing community disturbance signals. Disturbance signals. The phrase was vague on purpose. The board chair loved language that sounded official but meant nothing. It gave her room to push later. A deadline was printed in bold. Compliance review tonight, 9 p.m. Tonight. The same night Evan warned me about. I folded the letter slowly, feeling irritation sharpen into focus. Inside the house, my son was building a model bridge for school, humming softly, unaware that adults outside played small power games with real consequences. My phone buzzed with a community app alert. A post from Brenda Holloway sat pinned at the top. She reminded residents that unapproved devices could threaten neighborhood harmony. Several comments praised her vigilance. A few neighbors asked what counted as unapproved. She never answered directly. That silence was strategy. By late afternoon, a dark sedan rolled past our driveway twice. On the third pass, it slowed. The tyrant in heels stepped out, red blazer bright against the beige houses. She didn't come to the door. She walked the sidewalk, eyes scanning fences, cameras, meters, like a surveyor of control. I stepped outside before she could perform her usual surprise knock. "Looking for something?" I asked. Her smile arrived polished. "Routine observation. We ensure standards." "From the sidewalk?" I said. Visibility matters, the enforcer in crimson replied. Transparency keeps communities safe. Safe. The word tasted ironic after the midnight testing of my lock. She scribbled on her clipboard, then glanced at my camera dome. Some systems capture more than permitted angles. My system captures my property, I answered calmly. We'll verify that tonight, Brenda Holloway said, tone light, eyes firm. 9 p.m. Don't be late. She walked off before I could respond, leaving the faint scent of perfume and pressure behind. A neighbor across the street pretended to water already wet plants, clearly listening. The whole block felt like a stage where the board chair directed scenes. Back inside, I reviewed our camera fields again. Every lens was compliant. I knew the municipal code better than most because I installed these systems for a living. Still, the timing of her visit lined up too neatly with the earlier probing. Near sunset, my sister called, asking if everything was all right. I kept details thin, but she heard the tension anyway. Document everything, she urged. People like that count on intimidation. I already was. At 8:30, headlights flickered outside as different cars slowed near our house. Curiosity traveled fast in HOA neighborhoods. The clipboard queen had turned a private issue into quiet theater. Pressure worked better with an audience. I set the tablet to live monitor mode. Every sensor armed, every log mirrored to cloud storage. If someone touched a handle, I'd know. If someone crossed a line, there would be a record. At 8:55, a notification chimed. Perimeter motion, backyard zone. I pulled up the feed. A tall figure moved near the fence, partially hidden by shadow. Not Brenda Holloway, broader shoulders, male. He crouched near the gate like he already understood the latch. My pulse slowed instead of racing. Preparation does that. Fear shrinks when systems are ready. Another alert stacked over the first. Front walkway approach. 2 directions at once. Through the front camera, I saw the board chair striding toward my door, posture confident, clipboard tucked like a badge. Through the rear camera, I saw the man testing. The split view on my tablet forced a choice, front door or backyard. The board chair lifted her hand to knock, perfectly composed, while the man behind my fence worked my latch like he'd practiced. I tapped a silent alert that tagged both feeds for priority recording. Timestamps locked in. A firm knock hit the door. 3 measured raps. Authority theater. I opened it halfway. The enforcer in crimson stood there with a thin smile. Compliance review, she said, raising the clipboard slightly. We like cooperation. Behind my back, the tablet vibrated again. Rear gate pressure spike. He was applying weight now. Interesting hour for a review, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. We accommodate working families, Brenda Holloway said smoothly. May I come in to inspect the panel location? No interior inspections without prior written notice, I answered. Her eyes flickered for a fraction of a second. She hadn't expected that line. Exterior verification is sufficient. The tyrant in heels shifted her stance, recalculating. Then we'll walk the perimeter. Of course, I said, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. My thumb slid across the tablet screen, bringing the backyard feed to full brightness. The man's face caught a slice of infrared glow. Mid-40s, baseball cap, HOA polo, not random. The clipboard queen started down the walkway, heels clicking like a metronome for tension. We've had reports of signal interference, she continued. Some residents felt their remotes lag. Interference has measurable signatures, I said, happy to compare logs. She didn't respond to that. Instead, she angled toward the side yard, moving faster now, too eager. The camera showed the man freezing, then pretending to check the fence slat like a concerned neighbor. Sloppy recovery. We rounded the corner together. The board chair projected surprise when she saw him. Oh, Tom, you're here already? Tom. A name, finally. He straightened. Just checking alignment on shared fencing, he muttered. At 9 at night? I asked. No rule against it, he said. Actually, there is, I replied calmly. Noise and maintenance restrictions after 8. Brenda Holloway cut in quickly. Let's stay focused. We're here about your system. My tablet chimed softly. I turned it so the screen faced them both. The system? I asked. A replay rolled automatically, 30 minutes earlier. The same man at my back gate during daylight, testing the handle, glancing toward the street, pre-positioning. My cameras didn't just see live. They stitched behavior patterns. Tom's jaw tightened. The tyrant in heels inhaled slowly, then smiled wider, like this was all minor. Curiosity isn't a crime. Tampering is, I said, and attempting access is logged. Neighbors' porch lights began flipping on. Curtains shifted. HOA communities had thin walls for drama. The clipboard queen noticed the attention and lowered her voice. You're escalating unnecessarily. I'm documenting, I corrected. Another alert popped up. Attempted code entry on the rear smart lock. Someone had tried a default sequence. My system flagged it as a learning attempt. That meant prior knowledge of the model. I looked from the screen to Tom. You've installed these before. He hesitated a beat too long. The board chair stepped closer to me. Voice silk over steel. Let's not make neighbors anxious. Disable the advanced features and this ends quietly. There it was. Not about rules. About control over visibility. I zoomed the display and showed them the encrypted log routing. These feeds mirror off-site in real time. I don't disable safety for optics. A dog barked down the block. A door opened somewhere. The neighborhood was awake now. Brenda Holloway's pleasant mask thinned. Non-compliance leads to fines. And documented harassment leads to liability, I said. For the first time, silence settled between us like a line drawn. The man at the fence stepped back, suddenly less brave without shadows. Then my tablet delivered a new notification header I hadn't expected. External device proximity detected. Someone nearby was pinging my network with an HOA-registered maintenance tablet ID. I raised my eyes to the clipboard queen. Her device was in her hand, screen glowing faintly. The enforcer in crimson realized I'd seen it, and she slowly lowered the clipboard. The glow from her tablet washed across her face as she lowered the clipboard, and for a second, the confident mask slipped. I saw a calculation there, fast and sharp, like she was rearranging a script in her head. The board chair recovered quickly, but the pause told me I'd hit something real. You're scanning my network, I said quietly. That's not a courtesy check. Brenda Holloway let out a small breath, almost a laugh. We monitor community bandwidth for security risks. From my fence line, the tyrant in heels stepped closer, lowering her voice. You installed equipment that affects shared signals. We verify impact. My tablet chimed again. I turned it slightly so only I could see. The log showed repeated handshake attempts from her device, tagged with administrative credentials belonging to the association. Not homeowner level. Board level. That mattered. Across the yard, Tom pretended to study a hinge, but his shoulders were tight. He knew this was drifting off their usual script. Porch lights multiplied along the street, and silhouettes filled windows. The neighborhood always smelled drama before it saw it. I don't consent to scans, I said, projecting just enough for nearby ears. Any further attempts get documented as intrusion. The clipboard queen smiled thinly. Strong words, precise words. A breeze rattled the maple leaves over the fence, the same tree my daughter used as a landmark when she played hide and seek. The memory steadied me. This wasn't a gadget dispute. This was about people who thought authority meant access. Brenda Holloway straightened. Let's reset. Disable remote alerts to external servers and we'll mark this resolved. No. The answer landed between us like a stone. The enforcer in crimson tried a different angle. You're creating unnecessary fear. Families trust the board. Families trust safety, I replied. My system doesn't touch anyone else's property. My screen flashed a new pane, device mapping. Her tablet, Tom's phone, and a third unknown device were clustered near my rear boundary. The unknown one pulsed, then disappeared. A relay. Someone else was involved. I looked up slowly. Who else is running scans tonight? A flicker crossed Brenda Holloway's eyes. There and gone. No one, she said. My tablet captured the micro-expression and time stamped it with the rest. Pattern recognition didn't just track machines, it tracked moments. Footsteps approached from the sidewalk. Mrs. Alvarez from 2 houses down stood there in a robe, arms folded. Everything all right? She called. The board chair pivoted instantly, public voice on. Routine compliance visit. At night? Mrs. Alvarez asked. Silence stretched. I angled my tablet so the glow was visible but not readable. We're discussing unauthorized network access. More curtains shifted. Attention was a currency here, and the tyrant in heels was suddenly spending too much of it. Tom finally spoke. Maybe we come back tomorrow. Brenda Holloway shot him a look that could cut glass. Control was slipping, and she hated that more than any rule violation. Another alert vibrated through my hand. My daughter's room sensor had activated, registering movement near the back hallway window. She was awake, probably watching the lights outside. A cold thread pulled through my chest. I tapped a quick preset that hardened the house perimeter and sent a silent status ping to my brother, who'd helped design the failsafes. Not an alarm, just a nudge. The clipboard queen noticed my movement. "What did you just do?" "Checked on my family," I said. The board chair studied my face, searching for tells. "You're taking this too far. You came to my door at night, scanned my network, and tested my gate. I'm just keeping up." For the first time, uncertainty crept into her posture. The enforcer in crimson thrived on dominance, but this ground wasn't steady anymore. A distant siren wailed somewhere beyond the subdivision, faint but growing. Maybe unrelated. Maybe not. Around here, sound traveled strangely after dark. The late-night calm shattered with a whisper that crept down the street. Something unspoken, fragile, but charged. Mrs. Alvarez stepped out again, this time from her porch shadows, eyes flickering between Brenda Holloway and me like she carried a secret she wasn't ready to reveal. The clipboard queen, usually so quick to control every conversation, faltered beneath that gaze. I caught the glance Mrs. Alvarez cast toward Brenda, a hesitation I hadn't expected from our usually unshakable board chair. It was subtle, but clear, a crack in the facade. "I need to talk," Mrs. Alvarez said under her breath, barely audible, her voice a thread pulling me away from the confrontation and deeper into the tangled web Brenda had spun around this neighborhood. The tyrant in heels noticed immediately, her posture stiffening like a cornered animal. She took a step toward Mrs. Alvarez, voice sharp and low. "What are you doing? This isn't your business." Mrs. Alvarez ignored the warning, moving closer to me in the dim light, the tension in her eyes louder than any words. "There's more going on than you know. Brenda's been hiding things from the community, things about that so-called security system. You're right to be suspicious." The enforcer in crimson, now less queen and more desperate player, narrowed her eyes. "You're making things up. I run this board fairly." I watched Brenda's expression as Mrs. Alvarez spoke, conflicted, torn between loyalty and something else. The board chair's smooth mask slipped once more, revealing a hint of panic. Mrs. Alvarez's voice dropped even lower. "Her husband's involvement goes way beyond what anyone suspects. That Taser incident with your kid, that was just the beginning. There are illegal surveillance devices, hidden, wired into your home networks without consent." The air thickened. I saw the weight of her words settle on Brenda Holloway, the clipboard queen's grip on power visibly shaking. Her next move would tell me everything. I stepped forward, voice steady. "Show me." Mrs. Alvarez hesitated a moment, then nodded. "Meet me tomorrow afternoon. I'll tell you everything." The tyrant in heels' eyes flicked between us, calculating damage control. "This is private property. You don't need to listen to hearsay." "This isn't hearsay anymore," I said. "It's about safety, about what happened to my family." Brenda's jaw tightened, the enforcer in crimson no longer the calm, collected leader, but a woman cornered by truths she couldn't deny. The clipboard queen's reign was cracking, and neighbors were watching. Later at my workshop, I reviewed the network traffic Mrs. Alvarez hinted at, a jigsaw puzzle of unauthorized access points and encrypted signals. Using my background in cybersecurity engineering, I mapped the invisible threads Brenda's husband and his cohorts had woven into our lives. Each node was a breach, a violation not just of privacy, but of trust. Tom, the conflicted witness from earlier, hovered at the edge of my space, hesitant but eager to help. He'd seen too much, had the kind of insider knowledge that only someone living within the community could have. When I pressed, his resistance cracked. "There's a back channel," he admitted quietly. "Brenda's husband controls a private security network nobody's supposed to know about. It's off the books, unregulated. They use it to spy on residents and keep tabs on anyone who pushes back." The weight of that confession hung heavy between us. This wasn't just an HOA power play. It was surveillance weaponized against the people it was supposed to serve. The man who had tasered my child was a linchpin in a larger, more sinister operation. "We need proof," I said. "Something undeniable." Tom nodded, the internal battle playing across his face. He knew what he was risking. "I can get it, but it's dangerous." The board chair's tactics had escalated into outright intimidation and illegal surveillance. My daughter's safety, the entire neighborhood's peace, it was all on the line. But with Mrs. Alvarez's confession and Tom's insider knowledge, the pieces were finally aligning. I looked out my window at the dark streets illuminated by porch lights, each one a beacon of community, watching, waiting. Brenda Holloway had underestimated the strength beneath our neighborhood's surface. Her web was tangled, but not impenetrable. This wasn't just about me or my family anymore. It was about every homeowner who deserved to live free from fear and tyranny, and with allies emerging from the shadows, I was ready to pull back the curtain. Tomorrow would bring answers, but tonight, the battle lines were clear. The board chair's reign, the enforcer in Crimson's control, they were under scrutiny now, and I wasn't backing down. The next morning dawned heavy with purpose. I sat at my kitchen table, a clutter of devices spread before me, laptops, routers, and encrypted drives, all tools in the fight ahead. The air was thick with the scent of strong coffee and resolve. I knew Brenda Holloway, the clipboard queen, wasn't going to back down without a fight. Neither was I. Brenda, or as the neighborhood whispered, the enforcer in Crimson, had already sensed the shift in power. Her grip on the HOA board, once ironclad, was slipping through fingers clenched too tight. But she wasn't just going to roll over. No, the tyrant in heels was preparing her next move, and it was sure to sting. I called Tom early, the conflicted witness who had finally broken silence. His insider knowledge was now our most valuable asset. "Are you ready?" I asked, voice low but steady. "We need every detail, every secret Brenda's been hiding." His hesitation was palpable even over the crackling phone line. "There's one place, the hub of their operation. Brenda's husband controls it. If we can expose that, it's game over for them." The board chair's husband, the man who'd tasered my child, was the shadow lurking behind every violation, every intimidation tactic. This wasn't just an HOA board anymore. It was a covert surveillance ring, a fortress built on fear and lies. I spent the day assembling a plan, digital forensics combined with community outreach. My engineering background let me trace their encrypted signals, but this wasn't just a tech battle. We had to prepare the neighborhood for what was coming, to turn whispers into roars. That evening, I met with Mrs. Alvarez again, the neighbor with a heart brave enough to risk the wrath of Brenda Holloway. The clipboard queen had no idea she was losing allies from within her own ranks. Mrs. Alvarez's conflicted eyes held the weight of secrets long kept, and her resolve now hardened like steel. "We can't let them silence us," she said quietly. "People need to know." I nodded, feeling the surge of community strength pulse beneath the surface. This was the turning point, where fear met resistance, where the enforcer in Crimson met the united front of neighbors ready to reclaim their homes. Meanwhile, Brenda was already mobilizing. I caught glimpses of her late-night calls, her furious board meetings behind closed doors. The tyrant in heels was crafting new bylaws, tightening control, trying to preempt any rebellion. But every move she made only fueled the fire of dissent. I coordinated with Tom to capture concrete proof, a digital trail from Brenda's husband's hub that no one could deny. Every packet of data, every unauthorized surveillance feed had to be exposed. We set traps in the network, baited hidden cameras to reveal themselves, and mapped the entire operation's vulnerabilities. The board chair's arrogance was her downfall. She believed she could control the narrative, silence the community, and keep her secrets buried. But as the sun set, the neighborhood felt different, charged with quiet anticipation, the buzz of change. I reached out to a few trusted neighbors, explaining the stakes without revealing everything. Their cautious but growing support was a lifeline. The tyrant in heels thrived on isolation, but together we were breaking her spell. That night, I reviewed the intercepted footage from the network. The images were chilling, hidden cameras in places no one should have been watched, encrypted messages coordinating patrols, and most damningly, the clear connection to the Taser incident. Brenda Holloway's empire of control was built on surveillance and fear. I felt a cold surge of anger mixed with determination. This wasn't just about punishment. It was about justice, safety, and reclaiming our right to privacy. Every neighbor deserved peace in their own home. Brenda's reign was crumbling, and the enforcer in Crimson was now the hunted. The clipboard queen's claws were sharp, but community strength was sharper. Tomorrow's meeting was the battleground. I prepared myself to expose everything. Brenda Holloway, the board chair, the tyrant in heels, and her husband's dark role. The digital evidence would speak louder than any words. As I powered down my laptop, the weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders. This was more than a fight for my family. It was a battle for every homeowner who ever felt powerless against the HOA's iron grip. And this time, we wouldn't back down. The morning sun filtered through the blinds as I laid out the final pieces of our plan. Every connection, every lead Tom had given me, every digital breadcrumb was aligned like a perfect storm waiting to break loose. Brenda Holloway, the clipboard queen, had spent months building a fortress of fear, and now that fortress was riddled with cracks. The enforcer in crimson believed that control came from intimidation, but we were about to show her that power could be dismantled with truth. My engineering background was my weapon, but this was more than technology. It was about people coming together to reclaim their neighborhood. I reached out to Mrs. Alvarez, the conflicted witness whose hesitation was now replaced with resolve. "We're ready," I told her quietly. "This is the moment we've been preparing for." Her eyes flickered with a mix of fear and determination. The tyrant in heels might have silenced others, but not us. Not anymore. The community canvassing was underway. I spent hours knocking on doors, speaking to neighbors who had long felt powerless. Some were wary, some angry, but most were ready to stand up. The stories poured in: harassment, intimidation, late-night threats. Brenda Holloway's reign had left scars on every street. Each conversation was a reminder that this fight wasn't just mine, it was ours. Back at my house, I coordinated with Tom to ensure the digital evidence was bulletproof. The board chair's husband had left traces of illegal surveillance and coordinated harassment in the network logs. We had everything, a web of deceit that the tyrant in heels had tried desperately to hide. I compiled files, cross-checked timestamps, and prepared a presentation that would leave no doubt in the upcoming community meeting. This was more than exposing Brenda Holloway. It was about reclaiming our safety and dignity. That afternoon, Brenda held her own emergency board meeting, no doubt sensing the shift. The clipboard queen paced like a caged tiger, barking orders and issuing threats to keep neighbors in line. But the whispers of rebellion had become too loud to ignore. Her tactics grew desperate, sending out warning letters, threatening fines, even implying legal action against anyone who spoke out. The enforcer in crimson was tightening her grip, but the community was already slipping through her fingers. I met with a small group of neighbors in my living room that evening. We strategized, shared updates, and prepared for the showdown. The energy was electric, equal parts fear and fierce hope. This was the moment when silence turned to roar. Tom shared a last-minute tip. Brenda's husband planned to escalate surveillance, potentially to intimidate more families. The tyrant in heels and her enforcer in crimson were dangerous, but their arrogance was their weakness. We planned to use Brenda's own tools against her, leaking the digital evidence to local authorities and the neighborhood at large. Public exposure would be the scalpel to cut through their web of lies. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a cold determination settle over me. This wasn't just about the Taser incident anymore. It was about dismantling a corrupt system that preyed on its own people. Brenda Holloway, the board chair, the clipboard queen, she had underestimated the power of a united community armed with truth and courage. Tomorrow would be the reckoning. The community center buzzed with quiet tension as neighbors gathered, whispers rippling like an undercurrent beneath the fluorescent lights. I watched Brenda Holloway enter, the board chair with her usual swagger, the clipboard queen perfectly poised in her tailored jacket. But tonight, the tyrant in heels seemed off balance, like the weight of the coming storm pressed down on her shoulders. She scanned the room with that calculating gaze, trying to find a foothold, but the momentum had shifted. The enforcer in crimson had lost her grip, and every face here carried the unspoken question, could we finally break free? I felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. This was the culmination of months. Every secret uncovered, every ally gained, every step toward justice. My phone buzzed quietly. Tom sent a thumbs-up emoji. Our digital evidence was ready to go live, ready to expose Brenda's web of intimidation and lies. The board chair cleared her throat, attempting control. "We're here to discuss the community's best interests," she said, voice sharp and polished. But the room didn't respond with the usual deference. The clipboard queen's words felt hollow, more like rehearsed lines than real leadership. I stood, voice steady but charged. Best interests? Like the night Brenda's husband tased my kid while SWAT showed up minutes later? Or the constant surveillance? The threats we've all endured? A ripple of gasps spread. Brenda's face hardened, her mask cracking. The tyrant in heels leaned forward, trying to regain command. "That's an exaggeration," she snapped. "We maintain order here. Some are just making trouble." "Order?" I shot back. "Your order feels like fear. We trusted you to protect this neighborhood. Instead, you've torn it apart." Voices rose around us, neighbors sharing their stories, their anger, their pain. The enforcer in crimson tried to shout over the crowd, but the tide had turned. Everyone wanted truth, justice, and a community where their kids could play without fear. Brenda Holloway's eyes flickered with panic. She knew this meeting was slipping beyond her control, but it wasn't just her anymore. It was every bully who thought power came from threats and silence. I pulled up the digital files on the big screen, the evidence of illegal surveillance, the timelines of harassment, the coordination between Brenda and her husband's actions. The room fell silent, faces fixed on the damning proof. The clipboard queen stammered, her confident facade shattered. The tyrant in heels was exposed, and her reign was ending. I turned back to the crowd, voice rising with conviction. "We're not victims, we're neighbors, and together we'll rebuild this community." Cheers erupted, shaking the room. The enforcer in crimson slunk back into her seat, defeated but unwilling to admit it. Brenda Holloway tried one last time, a desperate threat about legal consequences, but no one listened. Her words were empty now, drowned out by the roar of a community reclaiming its voice. The board chair who once ruled with an iron fist was now a figure of public disgrace. Her time was up. As the meeting wrapped, neighbors came forward, shaking my hand, offering support, and sharing plans to keep the momentum alive. The tyrant in heels had been unmasked, but the work was just beginning. This victory wasn't just mine, it was ours. Outside, the evening air felt charged with possibility. The neighborhood was waking up from fear, ready to heal. Brenda Holloway and her enforcer in crimson might still lurk in the shadows, but the light of truth and unity was stronger. Tomorrow, we'd start rebuilding, not just homes, but trust, safety, and community. The community hall was packed beyond capacity, the air thick with anticipation, whispers swirling like restless ghosts. Brenda Holloway swept in, the board chair whose iron grip had tightened this neighborhood for far too long. Tonight, the enforcer in crimson faced her reckoning under the unforgiving gaze of the very people she tried to control. The clipboard queen, as some called her behind closed doors, tried to summon authority, but the room hummed with defiance. The tyrant in heels looked uneasy, sensing the shift as eyes locked onto her with raw frustration and hurt. This was no ordinary meeting. This was the battlefield where years of fear and silence would be shattered. She opened with rehearsed words about community standards, safety, and unity, but her voice faltered, drowned beneath a rising tide of voices. One by one, neighbors stood, sharing stories of intimidation, harassment, and that night, when her husband pulled a taser on my kid and summoned SWAT in an instant. The enforcer in crimson's face paled. The clipboard queen clenched her fists, desperate to regain control. But the room had become a courtroom, and the people, jury and judge alike. I stood, heart pounding, and addressed the crowd. "We're not here to tear down our neighborhood. We're here to reclaim it. From fear, from abuse, and from those who wield power without accountability." A murmur of agreement spread. Brenda's eyes darted, trying to find support. But many in the room were tired of her lies, her threats, her tyrannical rule. The conflicted witness stepped forward, our neighbor who had silently watched Brenda's reign but struggled with loyalty and fear. Tonight, she chose courage over silence. Her voice trembled as she revealed crucial details about Brenda's manipulation behind the scenes, illegal surveillance, false complaints, and the cover-up of that terrifying night. Gasps echoed. The board chair tried to interrupt, but the room would no longer be silenced. The tyrant in heels was cornered. I revealed the evidence we had painstakingly gathered, digital recordings, eyewitness accounts, and timelines that exposed the cruelty masked as order. The community saw the full picture for the first time. Brenda Holloway's empire of control was crumbling. The enforcer in crimson launched a final, desperate attack, threatening legal action, fines, and consequences. But her threats sounded hollow. The clipboard queen's reign had lost legitimacy. A neighbor shouted from the back, "We want a vote. We want a new board." Cheers erupted. The meeting turned into a call for change, a demand for justice. Brenda Holloway's last stand was met with overwhelming opposition. The board chair's composure cracked. The tyrant in heels realized she was finished. As the vote was called, hands raised with determination. The community was taking back what had been stolen: peace, safety, and respect. In that charged moment, I felt a mix of relief and pride. Months of struggle had led to this tipping point. Brenda Holloway's power had been dismantled, not with violence, but with truth, unity, and resilience. The enforcer in crimson and her clipboard queen facade vanished into whispers and regret. The neighborhood breathed again, freed from the shadows of fear. As the meeting closed, neighbors gathered around, sharing hugs, tears, and smiles. The conflicted witness approached me, eyes bright with hope and new resolve. Together, we had sparked a movement, one that would ensure no family endured what mine had. Outside, the night was calm but electric, filled with the promise of a new beginning. Brenda Holloway might lurk still, but her grip was broken, and this community was ready to heal. The board chair who once ruled with threats had been dethroned by the people she sought to suppress. Tonight, justice was served, and the future looked brighter than it had in years. The morning sun spilled through my kitchen window, casting long shadows over a neighborhood that felt different, lighter, freer. Brenda Holloway was no longer the enforcer in crimson who dictated every step we took. The clipboard queen had been unmasked, and the tyrant in heels dethroned by the collective will of a community that refused to bow anymore. I sat at the table, the weight of the last few months settling in my chest. The battles, the sleepless nights, the constant fear, it all seemed both distant and raw at once. Brenda's shadow had haunted us, but now it was shrinking into a cautionary tale, a story of how unchecked power crumbles beneath truth and unity. The conflicted witness, once silent, now emboldened, had become an unexpected ally, her courage lighting the way for many who had been too afraid to speak. Together, we had changed the course of this neighborhood. But this victory wasn't just about ousting Brenda Holloway. It was about reclaiming what had always belonged to us: our peace, our safety, our dignity. I thought about my child, who had been at the center of that terrifying night when Brenda's husband had escalated fear into violence. That memory still burned, a scar that no victory could erase. But it also fueled my resolve to protect this community from ever descending into that darkness again. The new board, formed from neighbors who genuinely cared, gathered to rebuild with transparency and respect. They dismantled the invasive systems Brenda had put in place: the hidden cameras, the false complaint mechanisms, the culture of intimidation. The tyrant in heels' reign of terror was finally over. Brenda Holloway's name lingered in whispers, but the people moved forward. The neighborhood parks filled with laughter instead of hushed conversations. Front porches glowed with warm light instead of watchful eyes. As I walked the streets, neighbors greeted me with smiles and nods, no longer wary, but hopeful. The symbolic oak tree in the community square, once overshadowed by fear and secrets, now stood tall and proud, a living emblem of our resilience. I knew this fight wasn't unique. Many communities wrestled with the same toxic control, the same abuse disguised as order. But our story, our hard-won victory, could inspire others. It was a beacon for those feeling powerless against a system designed to silence them. And so, I share this with you, not just as my story, but as a call to stand firm when injustice visits your doorstep. Whether it's Brenda Holloway, the clipboard queen, or any tyrant in heels, remember that power belongs to the people who refuse to be intimidated. Our neighborhood will never forget the night SWAT rolled in, because one woman's fear sparked a chain of events that toppled a dictatorship. That night was a breaking point, a painful moment that ignited a movement. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. Together, we can shine a light on the darkness and reclaim our homes. The fight is hard, but it's worth every moment. Because in the end, justice isn't just about rules and laws. It's about protecting the heart of community and the safety of those we love most. Brenda Holloway thought she could control us with fear, but fear is a weak foundation. Love, courage, and unity build stronger neighborhoods. As the sun climbed higher, I felt a quiet peace settle within me. This was more than a victory, it was a new beginning.